It started as a simple stop at a gas station, but what followed will leave you speechless. Watch till the end and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. What would you have done in John Cena's place? Tell us in the comments. The afternoon sun blazed high above the quiet stretch of road, its heat beating down on the small suburban gas station tucked between the highway and a patch of dry trees. The air shimmered with the weight of summer, cicadas buzzing in the background like a constant, invisible choir. A few cars passed occasionally on the highway beyond, but here at the station, silence seemed to dominate. John Cena guided his sleek black car up to one of the pumps, his movements deliberate and calm. He had been driving for hours under the scorching sun, and his simple plan was straightforward. Fill the tank, step inside for a cold bottle of water, and then get back on the road. Nothing about the stop should have been unusual, yet the atmosphere carried an edge of heaviness that went unnoticed at first, the smell of gasoline mixing with the stifling heat, wrapping the station in an oppressive stillness. John stepped out, his broad frame casting a shadow across the pavement as he closed the door behind him. His eyes scanned briefly over the lot, a habit born from years of instinct, and then settled on the convenience store door. He turned toward it, ready to go inside, but before he could take more than a few steps, something caught his attention. It wasn't just sound, it was tone. The sharp edge of mocking laughter cut through the hum of cicadas. John frowned slightly, pausing, his gaze shifting toward the far end of the gas station. What he saw made the muscles in his jaw tighten. A group of 6 bikers had gathered near one of the pumps, their motorcycles lined up in a haphazard row. Leather jackets, patched with symbols and slogans, hung from their broad shoulders. Chains clinked as they shifted their weight, their voices carrying too easily in the summer air. At the center of their circle stood a young black woman, her uniform crisp but her posture tense. She held a gas nozzle in her hand, clutching it tightly as though it were the only shield she had. Her eyes betrayed a mixture of fear and defiance, though her chin was held high. The bikers circled her with predatory amusement. One of them, a burly man with a scruffy beard and a heavy chain looped around his neck, barked a laugh and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Hey, girl, you sure you know what you're doing with that pump, or are you just holding it for show?" His companions burst into raucous laughter, each sound echoing cruelty. Another biker, lean with tattoos crawling up his arms like snakes, stepped closer. His smirk widened as he added, "Bet she doesn't even know how to turn it on. Must have begged for this job. Probably just trying to hit some diversity quota." The woman's jaw tightened. She tried to maintain her composure, though her grip on the nozzle betrayed the tension running through her. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of resistance. "I'm just here to do my job. If you've got a problem, you can take it up with my manager." Her calm response did not ease the situation. It only fanned the flames of their mockery. Another man, scar etched across his cheek like a permanent sneer, leaned forward and spat out, "Listen to that. She thinks she's tough. Don't get too comfortable, sweetheart. Jobs like this don't last long for people like you." From inside the convenience store, John stood by the counter, his hand resting on the surface as he watched. The young cashier, no older than a teenager, shifted nervously and muttered under his breath, "They're always like this. Nobody wants to get involved." John didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the scene outside, the storm building before him. The tension snapped when one of the bikers suddenly lunged forward. The burly man with the chain grabbed the young woman's arm, his grip rough and possessive. "Why don't you take a break and come for a ride with us? We'll show you what real fun looks like." The woman recoiled, her eyes wide with fear. In a desperate attempt to free herself, she swung the nozzle wildly, gasoline spraying out and splattering across the biker's jacket. The sharp smell filled the air instantly. The man stumbled back, cursing, his laughter gone and replaced by pure rage. "You little—" he snarled, wiping at his soaked clothes. His voice dripped with venom as he shouted to the others, "She's going to regret that!" The laughter of the group died abruptly. Their expressions hardened. One of them stepped forward, snatching the nozzle from her hands, his face twisting into a cruel grin. With deliberate malice, he turned the stream of gasoline back onto her, drenching her uniform. The liquid soaked through the fabric, darkening it with every passing second. "How do you like that, huh?" he sneered. "Let's see how tough you are now." The young woman froze. For the first time, her defiance faltered. Fear flashed across her face, her breathing quickening. Then another biker stepped forward, slower, more menacing. From his pocket, he pulled a small matchbook, flicking it open casually. The sound of a single match striking filled the tense air. The tiny flame flickered against the sunlight, a small but devastating threat. "Feeling brave now, little miss?" he hissed. "One wrong move, and this whole place goes up." Inside the store, John's hand clenched into a fist. His eyes narrowed, the weight of decision pressing down on him. The moment had gone from harassment to the edge of disaster. There was no more time to wait. He tossed his change onto the counter without a word and pushed open the door. The glass swung outward, the sound sharp against the stillness. He stepped into the heavy heat, his stride measured and deliberate. His eyes locked on the group, his broad frame cutting an unmistakable figure as he walked closer. The bikers turned, momentarily startled by his presence. "Hey!" John's voice cut through the tension like a blade. The soaked biker sneered, his bravado returning in the face of a new target. "Who the hell are you supposed to be? Her knight in shining armor?" John stopped a few feet away, his gaze cold and unwavering. His voice was steady, controlled, but it carried a weight that silenced the murmurs around them. "You're crossing a line. Walk away now, and we can all forget this happened." The leader, a massive man with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck, stepped forward. His presence was larger, heavier, his sneer confident. "And if we don't, what are you going to do about it, tough guy?" John's expression didn't change. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "You really want to find out?" The bikers exchanged glances, their earlier laughter beginning to return as they sized him up. The air grew thick with hostility, the sound of cicadas suddenly distant under the pounding tension. The young woman, still covered in gasoline, looked at John, fear in her eyes now mixed with something else, a fragile glimmer of hope. John didn't move. His stance was relaxed, but his body carried the quiet readiness of someone who knew what was coming. The fight hadn't begun yet, but the line had already been drawn. The nightmare at the gas station was no longer just hers. It was his as well. The air around the pumps felt combustible even without the gasoline, heat shimmering off the asphalt, cicadas whispering at the edges, an invisible drum roll beneath a moment that was already too taut. John Cena stood a few paces from the circle of chrome and leather, and the young attendant, her shirt clinging wet against her arms, watched him as if measuring whether hope was real or just another thing that gets taken away. "Walk away," John said, voice level, "right now." The burly man, dripping fuel, barked a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Look at this hero," he said, spreading his arms so the gasoline gleamed in the sun. "Tell you what, big man, mind your own business." The leader moved closer, a wall of muscle and ink, jaw tight with a practiced smirk. His boots clicked on concrete. "We were having a conversation," he said. "You just turned it into an interruption." John didn't look at him. He looked past him, to the girl's trembling hands, to the matchbook still poised in the scarred cheek's fingers, to the chain that swayed from the burly man's neck like a promise. Then he lifted his gaze, steady as a sunrise. It ends here. Silence tipped forward, ready to fall. The wiry one with tattoos up his arms was the first to move, impatience beating judgment to the punch. He lunged, throwing a wide, dirty right that aimed for John's jaw like a thrown brick. John stepped half a shoe length left. The fist skimmed air. John's hand caught the attacker's wrist and rotated it down and in, a clean 90-degree collapse that folded the man to one knee. John guided him the rest of the way with a small push between the shoulder blades. The biker kissed concrete. "Get up," the leader hissed at him. "Now!" The chain-bearer roared and charged. The steel loop came up in both hands as if he meant to garrote the day. John slid inside the arc before the chain closed, shoulder pinning the man's sternum. He hooked 2 fingers through a dangling link and yanked down, sharp, simple, bringing the chain across the biker's own forearms and locking his hands to his chest. Elbow, short and brutal, tucked into the ribs. Breath burst out of the man in a wet grunt. John twisted the chain free and sent it skittering under a pump with the flick of a wrist. "Back off," John said. The man with the scar laughed, struck the match again, more for theater than fire, and the tiny orange tongue wavered. Or what? John stepped toward him, not rushing, the world narrowing to the radius of the flame and the reek of gas. Scarred Cheek tried confidence. His hand tried for steadiness. John's left hand closed over the biker's knuckles, thumb pinning the proximal joint. His right hand tapped the man's wrist bone and rotated. The match kissed dust, dead. John's palm laid the matchbook gently in Scarred Cheek's pocket, the gesture almost polite. "This isn't a show," he said, low enough that only the circle heard. "Drop it." The leader's smirk thinned. The man's eyes changed, the way eyes do when the jokes move out and the bill comes. He jerked his chin. "Take him." They came in a wave, 3 shapes, 3 angles. One with a wrench held like a club, one with fists, the third trying to flank around toward the attendant. John pivoted to his right, intercepting the wrench first. He lifted his forearm in a tight, vertical frame. Steel rang off muscle. He trapped the biker's wrist against his bicep and slid his other forearm under the elbow, levering the joint. The wrench tumbled from numb fingers. John kicked it backward under a car with a heel tap. The second attacker, knuckles clenched, was already inside range. John let the punch graze his shoulder, absorbing the angle, then sent 2 clean jabs into the man's ribs. Targets chosen not for cruelty, but for efficiency. The biker's spine bent. John's third strike was an elbow that crossed the cheekbone like a comet. The man dropped, palms slapping the ground a beat too late to save his dignity. The third one reached for the attendant's wrist, intent on pulling her back into the ring. John's voice cut sideways. "Don't." There was a gravity to the word that made the biker hesitate. Half a heartbeat, no more, but enough. John slid between them, his presence now a moving wall. He gave the girl a single glance. Move away. And she did, stepping toward the store's doorway, away from the spill of fuel. "Stay by the door," John said without looking back. "Don't run. Don't talk. Breathe." She nodded, though he didn't see it. "Are you done?" the leader asked, voice flat. He reached behind his belt and produced a knife, the kind designed to make a point even when it wasn't touching you. The blade flashed, a clean line of sunlight. "We're done when she's safe," John said, "and when you leave." The leader smiled with only the lower half of his face. "Then we're not done." He tested the air with the knife, lazy arcs that mapped out range. John let the distance settle. Feet planted, hips soft. The leader feinted high, slashed low, then snapped the blade toward John's abdomen. John turned his hips, the edge whispering across fabric and nothing else. He caught the leader's wrist with both hands, thumbs pressing into flexor tendons, and rotated the hand outward. The knife clattered. The leader surged forward to body him, intent on momentum over technique. John pivoted, borrowed the force, and sent the man over his hip. Asphalt took his breath away. The burly biker, still damp, still furious, saw his chance while John's hands were on the leader. He barreled in from behind, shoulder first. John's peripheral caught the moving mass. He stepped offline and slapped the man's triceps downward with an open hand, redirecting the rush past his center. A knee rose and touched the biker's thigh, deadening it. The man stumbled, grabbed at empty air, and ate the ground beside his leader. "Get up," the leader wheezed, rage stripped of swagger now. "All of you, get up." They did. Pride can be heavier than a motorcycle when a crowd is watching. Two of them tried to flank again, learning the wrong lesson from a moment before. John moved before they did, forward, not back, crashing the line where their timing met. He trapped a forearm under his own and shaved it past his ribs so the biker's own shoulder torque carried him into a spin. John helped the spin finish with a palm against the back of the neck, a mercy disguised as a takedown. The other swung a hook meant to end the day. John's forearm rose, bone meeting bone with a thud that sounded like sense returning. Palm strike, vertical, tucked into the center line. The hook thrower collapsed, breath hunting for a door. "Enough," John said again, quieter this time, because quiet carried farther. The chain bearer stumbled to his feet and, maybe out of habit, maybe out of desperation, reached for the chain under the pump. John was already there, foot pinning the metal like a snake's head. "No," he said. The biker froze. John slid the chain back with his heel, the links rasping along concrete until they fell into shadow. "I said enough." The leader stood, face flushed. Blood traced a shy line from one nostril. He looked at the knife lying between oil stains and sun puddles, then at John, then at the girl by the door. Something calculating shifted behind his anger, a ledger balancing threat and loss. He rolled his shoulders, pretending the choice was about boredom, not defeat. "You got lucky," he said. "Wrong day for us, right day for you." "Luck didn't touch this," John said. The leader took a step forward as if to test whether words could still shove. John didn't move. The space answered for him. Rage gilded the leader's voice. "Boys." They gathered what they could, dropped pride, scattered breath, a few curses to spackle the cracks, and formed up around the bikes. One of them, face motted red where elbow had met cheek, looked like he wanted to try again. The leader shook his head, small but final. Engines turned over, chugging to life in uneven sequence. The sound was thunder-scaled to the size of men. The leader swung onto his seat and pointed at John with 2 fingers, the cheap kind of promise that leans on tomorrow. "This isn't over." John didn't answer. He looked past the man, out toward the road, making sure the path into and out of the station was clear of the pooling fuel. He turned his head only when the bikes began to roll, his gaze following them as they threaded between pumps and out to the service road. Sunlight flared across chrome, then dulled as dust lifted. The noise dwindled to a growl, then to nothing but the cicadas again, working the heat into a steady song. For a long breath, nobody moved. The attendant was the first to break the spell. She took one step, then another, stopping at the edge of the spill, as if the gasoline were a border she hadn't been granted permission to cross. "Are you?" Her voice caught, then steadied. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," John said. He scanned the lot, confirming everything that mattered. The extinguished match, the chain out of reach, the wrench sleeping under a chassis, the nozzle lying on its side near the pump handle. He bent, picked up the nozzle, and set it into its cradle so the valve wouldn't dribble fuel across the ground. You? She looked down at her soaked shirt as if noticing it for the first time. Yes, I think so. John nodded toward the store. There's a restroom. Paper towels. Try not to use water first. It spreads the smell. Dab, then soap. She managed a small, incredulous smile that pulled a crack of light through what had been all shadow. You sound like you've done this before. I've seen trouble before, John said, which wasn't quite the same thing, but close enough for now. The teenager at the counter, who had watched with the stunned stillness of someone who would replay the moment 100 times later and add flourishes, pushed open the door an inch, then another, as if the air outside might bite. Are they gone? He asked, voice thin. They're gone, John said. A middle-aged man by the ice machine, who had pretended to be inspecting bags during the worst of it, cleared his throat. That was something. He looked at the attendant, then at John, then found somewhere else to aim his eyes. You, need me to call anyone? The girl shook her head. I'll tell my manager. She looked back at John. Thank you. He gave her a small nod that said he'd heard her, but wasn't the point. With the same simple economy he'd used to end the fight, John walked the perimeter of the pumps, visually checking for anything stupid, smoldering nothing, fresh spills, a cap left open. Satisfied, he turned toward the store. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at the road. Habit, not fear. The horizon was clean, but the leader's parting sneer still hung in the heat like a cloud that hadn't decided whether to rain. Inside, the cool air smelled like sugar and stale coffee. John placed a few bills on the counter for the bottle he hadn't tasted and the steadying seconds he'd borrowed. The teenager stared at the money like it was a talisman. Mister, he said, voice hushed, if they come back, John said, you call your manager and you call the police. You don't go outside. He tipped his head toward the attendant. Watch out for her. That's your whole job. The kid nodded, something young and certain sparking behind his eyes. Yes, sir. The attendant emerged from the restroom moments later, hair damp where she had rinsed what couldn't be blotted. Her shirt was changed for a spare from the back, a size too big but dry. She kept her chin up when she met John's gaze. I won't leave, she said, as if daring herself to hear the words out loud. I'm not quitting. Good, John said. Bad people love empty places. He pushed the door open again, and the heat met him like a weight he knew how to carry. Outside, the afternoon had moved on a little, shadows shifting under the pumps. John crossed to his car and, hand on the door, glanced once more down the road. Sun, asphalt, the faint shimmer of air, nothing else. He slid into the driver's seat and set his bottle in the cup holder, not yet thirsty. For a moment, both hands on the wheel, he let stillness settle back into him. The station looked ordinary. Again, paint, lights, a ripple of heat, but ordinariness has a way of being fragile, and the leader's final look had been a promise dressed as a warning. John turned the key. The engine caught, smooth and even. He pulled away from the pump slow, checked the mirror, then eased onto the service road. As the station receded in the rear view, he kept the far shoulder in his periphery, and the possibility of returning engine somewhere just behind his thoughts. He wasn't the kind to borrow trouble, but he knew the sound of a storm deciding whether to circle back. He merged onto the highway, the lane opening ahead like a line he meant to hold. The cicadas faded, The hum of travel took their place. Sun beat down. Asphalt unspooled. Behind him, the gas station shrank to a bright square in the distance. Ahead, the road ran long. The day wasn't finished with him yet. The highway stretched ahead in long, sun-bleached lines, the hum of John Cena's car steady beneath his hands. For a moment, the world felt normal again. The gas station shrinking in the mirror, the cicadas fading into memory. But John's instincts never loosened easily. He replayed the confrontation, every strike, every decision. He had ended it cleanly, but the leader's last words weren't just noise. They had been a promise. 10 minutes later, the rearview mirror caught a flicker of motion. At first, it was distant, a shimmer of chrome and leather blurring in the heat waves. Then it became clear. The roar of engines, the shapes weaving through traffic. 6 motorcycles, closing fast. John's jaw tightened. He gripped the wheel, eyes flicking from mirror to side glass. They weren't done. The same faces, the same hunger for payback, led by the massive figure of the leader hunched over his bike. The leader lifted one hand, signaling the others into formation. 2 drifted to either side, boxing John in. Another pulled ahead, blocking the lane. The message was clear. No escape, not on their terms. One biker veered close, his fist slamming against the car's window with a dull thud. He shouted through the glass, "You think you can just walk away from this? We're not done yet." His words were lost in the engine's growl, but John caught enough. The car absorbed the hit, but the escalation was growing sharper. Another rider tossed a glass bottle. It shattered against the windshield, the fragments scattering across the hood. The impact wasn't enough to damage, but it was enough to prove intent. John's eyes cut to the green road sign ahead. Rest stop, 2 miles. His decision came instantly. He couldn't fight here, not on the open road, not where other cars and drivers could get caught in the crossfire. If they wanted him, he'd give them their stage, but on his terms. He adjusted his speed, easing back just enough to make them think he was faltering. The bikers tightened their circle, emboldened by what they thought was fear. John guided the car toward the exit lane, his face calm, his eyes unblinking. The rest stop was almost deserted. A cracked parking lot stretched out, bordered by a row of vending machines and a wooden bench near the tree line. Perfect, John pulled in, cutting the engine. He stepped out slowly, deliberately, letting the silence before the storm fill the space. The motorcycles followed, their engines revving like war drums. Tires squealed as they circled into a semi-ring, hemming him in. Dust rose, stinging the air. The leader swung off his bike last, his boots heavy against the asphalt. The knife glinted again in his hand, catching the sinking sunlight. "You made a mistake back there, hero," he growled. "You think you can humiliate us and just drive off? This time, there's no crowd to save you. No cameras. Just you and us." John stood tall, shoulders loose, his stance neither defensive nor careless. His voice was calm, the kind of calm that made anger seem small. "You came looking for trouble. I finished it, but if you want to try again, I'll remind you how it ends." The leader sneered, flicking his blade. "Different rules now. Boys, take him down." The first strike came from the left. A biker swung a steel pipe at John's head. He ducked smoothly, the pipe cutting air, and stepped inside the man's reach. His fist drove upward in a brutal uppercut, snapping the man's jaw and sending him sprawling onto the cracked asphalt. Another rushed with a chain, whipping it forward. John caught the chain on its arc, yanked hard, and the biker stumbled forward helplessly. John's boot met his midsection, folding him in half before he hit the ground. The others hesitated, the memory of their earlier defeat creeping back. The leader barked, "What are you waiting for? Get him!" 3 came at once. John moved with precision, every motion stripped of excess. He swept one man's legs, sending him crashing backward. He caught a punch from another, twisting the arm, and driving an elbow into the man's ribs. The third tried to flank, but John spun, catching him with a knee strike that left him breathless on the pavement. The leader stepped in, knife flashing. His slashes cut the air fast and vicious. John dodged narrowly, the blade kissing the fabric of his shirt but finding no flesh. He waited, let the man overextend, then struck, his fist hammering into the wrist. The knife flew free, clattering onto the concrete. John seized the moment, gripping the leader's jacket and slamming him into the vending machine. The glass rattled, dust shook loose, and the leader slid down, dazed, his pride cracked wider than his ribs. The parking lot fell silent, except for the bikers' groans. One by one, they scrambled back, dragging their injured with them. Their bravado was gone, replaced by fear. Engines roared again, not with menace, but with desperation. The leader glared at John one last time, clutching his side, before revving hard and tearing down the road. The others followed, their noise fading into the distance. Dust settled. The quiet returned, broken only by the hum of the vending machine and the rustle of trees at the edge of the lot. John stood still, breathing evenly, watching the horizon until even the faint growl of engines disappeared. His body was coiled with adrenaline, but his face remained steady. He had won again, but he knew what it meant. They had pushed it farther. And they might not stop. He walked back to his car, scanning the lot once more for threats. Nothing. Just silence. He slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and eased back onto the road. The rest stop shrank behind him, but the promise of unfinished business still lingered in the air. The fight was over, for now, but the storm wasn't done circling. The highway took him back in, a ribbon of heat and light humming beneath the tires. John Cena kept his hands easy on the wheel, but the steadiness was earned, not assumed. The rest stop fell away behind him. Vending machines, cracked lines of paint, the smell of sun on oil, and the afternoon stretched forward with the quiet of a room after a door has slammed. He'd finished what the bikers started. Still, the leader's last look rode somewhere in the rear view, a shadow that hadn't quite let go. Blue and red flashed suddenly in the mirror. John blinked once, checked the speed on the dash, and eased the car onto the shoulder without drama. Gravel crunched, heat bent the horizon. A cruiser rolled in behind him and idled, the lights painting the air without a siren. The officer approached with a careful posture, hand near the holster but not tense, eyes riding everything. "Afternoon," he said, stopping a few feet back from John's open window. "Mind stepping out for a moment?" John shut off the engine and stepped out, palms visible, posture calm. "Something wrong, officer?" "We got a call about a disturbance at a rest stop a few miles back," the officer said, professional and even. "Reports mention a group of bikers and a man matching your description. Want to tell me what happened?" "There was an incident at a gas station," John said. 6 men harassed a young attendant. It escalated, gasoline, matches. I intervened. They later followed me and tried to corner me at the rest stop. I defended myself until they left. He kept the story stripped of heat, offering only the spine of it. The officer studied him, then gave a slow nod. "We've had trouble with that crew. They've been slippery. Intimidation. No one willing to sign a statement." He held out a hand. "License and registration." John passed them over. The officer returned to the cruiser. Sun beat down. The smell of warmed asphalt rose thick from the shoulder. A semi thundered past, wind buffeting the quiet back to life. When the officer returned, his posture had shifted. Less guarded, more settled. "Everything checks out," he said, handing the documents back. "I'm not going to hold you. For what it's worth, dispatch is getting more than one call about both incidents. If you see them again, call us sooner." "I'll keep that in mind," John said. The officer tipped his hat a fraction, as if acknowledging something that didn't fit on a form. "Drive safe." When the cruiser slid back into traffic, John returned to the lane with a smooth signal and a small exhale, like setting down a weight you've carried longer than you meant to. A message blinked across his phone screen on the console. Unknown number, short text. "Thank you for helping my employee. We gave statements to the police. Manager, South Ridge Gas." He read it twice, then set the phone back, not answering but absorbing the shape of gratitude. The miles unfolded again. Shadowed trees, rusted fences, a billboard peeling in the sun, until the rumor of adrenaline inside him faded from thunder to rain. He pulled into a diner at the edge of town when the light tilted toward evening. The bell over the door announced him to a room washed in coffee and grilled onions and the low murmur of people who knew how to fill silences with forks. John chose a booth near the window, back to the wall, eyes with a line to the door. The waitress arrived with a pad and a smile that had seen worse days than this one. "What can I get you?" "Coffee," he said. "Black." "You got it, honey." He wrapped his hands around the mug when it came, letting the heat climb into his fingers. 2 tables over, a young couple hunched over a phone, speakers low but not low enough to hide the sound of motorcycle engines. He didn't have to look to know what played. Laughter, disbelieving, impressed, tripped over whispered commentary. "Is that the guy?" the man asked, trying to make his whisper small enough to be private and failing. "It looks just like him," the woman said, eyes sliding to John and back, as if glances could be returned unopened. He gave them a brief, neutral smile and went back to his coffee. Someone at the counter lifted his own phone, and then someone else. A picture of the same moment made laps around the room in different hands. John kept his gaze on the window. He hadn't stepped into the ring for an audience. Attention had arrived anyway, as attention does, sudden and unsorted. It didn't change what had happened, and it didn't change why. He left a few bills under the mug and stood. The waitress met him at the register. "That was you, wasn't it?" "Just bad timing for him," he said. "Good timing for her," the waitress answered, handing him his change and then waving off his attempt to take it. "Forget it. Coffee's on us. World could use more like you." He didn't argue. He nodded once and pushed back out into the dusk. The sky had gone violet at the edges. Heat still held the center. He drove until the stars were reluctant and the road had stitched the day behind him. The motel room he took was simple: bed, chair, a table placed by the window. He slept lightly and rose before the sun had turned gold from gray. Coffee steamed in a paper cup, and the world was quiet enough to hear it breathe. His phone buzzed. At first, it was a scatter of notifications, news alerts, tagged links, snippets of text that all said the same thing in different fonts. Video of the gas station had caught fire. The headlines leapt from sober to breathless. Real-life action hero steps in at local station. 6 bikers, 1 man, no fear. John Cena delivers street justice. Threads braided praise with doubt. Was it necessary? What else could he have done? And none of it touched the core as far as he was concerned. He set the phone down on the table like it weighed more than glass. It buzzed again, a call this time. Unknown number. he answered. "Mr. Cena?" The voice was steady, official. "This is Officer Richards with the county police. I wanted to reach out personally. We reviewed footage and we've taken multiple witness statements about the incident at the gas station and the rest stop. Your intervention encouraged people to talk. We've been working this group for months without much traction. That changed yesterday." "I wasn't looking to make it public," John said. "I understand," the officer replied. "Either way, it helped. We're moving to press charges against the individuals identified. The young woman asked me to thank you. She's back at work this morning." A small, almost invisible smile touched his mouth. "Good. If you're staying in the area, we may follow up with a formal statement. If not, we have more than enough from witnesses and the video. And, for what it's worth, thank you." "Take care of her," John said, "and make sure they don't come back around." "We intend to." When the line clicked quiet, John stared at the phone a moment longer, then gathered his things and checked out. Morning laid a new sheet over the town. Shop lights blinking awake, delivery trucks nosing into alleys, people moving with the soft hurry between sleep and work. He drove past the gas station without planning to. It simply appeared at the bend, familiar now, the pumps like markers tied to a different version of the day. The attendant stood near the register, hair pulled back, posture square. She glanced up as his car rolled by and, after a beat, lifted a hand. It wasn't a wave for a celebrity. It was a quiet signal that said, "I'm still here." He returned the gesture with 2 fingers off the wheel and kept on. By noon, the day had found its heat again. He stopped at another diner, a narrow place with linoleum patterned to hide stains, and took a seat at the counter. The waitress recognized him before the coffee hit the saucer. "You're the guy," she said, delight rising in her voice. "From the video. Took on those bikers. That was something." "Right place, right time," he said. "Wrong place for them," she replied, topping off his mug with a kind of ceremony. The room carried its own low, looping conversation. 2 men argued about whether stepping in had made things worse or better, their disagreement human rather than hostile. A woman down the counter said someone needed to do something for once. A cook leaned out from the pass and gave John a chin lift that translated to respect. He ate without hurry, letting the noise become weather, pervasive and ignorable at the same time. When he stepped outside, a cluster of teenagers hovered near the lot's edge, their bravery cowed by awe. One of them, a boy with a scuffed backpack and a too big grin, peeled off from the group and approached, kicking at nothing as he came. "Mr. Cena," he said, voice skating between courage and caution, could I get a picture? My friends and I, we saw what you did. It was awesome." He winced at his own word choice, as if fear of sounding childish could swallow the ask. John considered him for a second, not the phone in the boy's hand, but the look in his eyes. It was the look of someone learning where the edges of right and wrong lived when no one else would draw the lines. "Sure," John said. "Just one." The boy's friend surged forward, then stopped, forming a respectful half-circle as if proximity could be politeness. The picture was quick. The boy's smile widened into something he would probably remember longer than the image itself. "Thanks, sir," he said, already backing up. My little sister, she works nights at a place like that. Thanks." "Take care of her," John said. "Look out for people. That's the whole trick." They nodded as if he'd handed them a key. He watched them go, energy and relief spilling together, then turned back to the car. The road called again. Not loudly, not like an escape, more like a steady invitation to keep moving. He merged with traffic, letting the rhythm fold him into its long, unremarkable song. The video, the headlines, the whispers, they would swell and break on their own schedule. That wasn't his work. His work was smaller and somehow heavier. Be present when presence mattered, act when silence would be a kind of surrender. As town gave way to fields and fields to the wide, open reach between, he let the window down a crack. Air rushed in, warm and carrying the faint sweetness of cut grass. He felt, not pride exactly, but an alignment, a sense that the decision he'd made at the pump had been the only version of the moment he could have lived with afterward. A mile marker slid by. Another. The day softened toward evening, shadows stretching long like restful gestures across the lanes. He thought of the attendants' square shoulders, of the officers' measured thanks, of a kid with a scuffed backpack asking for proof that courage had a face. He thought of the leader's knife hitting the concrete. He thought of how quickly a spark in the wrong hands could turn the ordinary into a page nobody wanted to read. He didn't think of himself as a hero. The word felt like a costume. He thought of himself as a man with two good hands and a low tolerance for cruelty. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it had to be. As the sun leaned toward the horizon, he found a stretch of road with no one in front of him and no one behind. The engine's hum was a metronome. The tires traced their lines like a signature written steady and plain. Somewhere, the video would keep looping, and opinions would stack up like plates in a busy sink. Somewhere else, a young woman would swipe a card at pump number 4 and look at the world with her chin held a fraction higher. Somewhere, a boy would tell his sister that standing up didn't always mean standing alone. John kept driving, not toward applause or away from trouble, but along the simple, stubborn lane that ran between. The night would come when it was ready. If the road bent back toward another moment that asked for more than watching, he'd be there. Not because people were looking, but because the choice would still be the same. One act of courage hadn't changed the world. It had changed enough. He let the sky turn gold on his windshield and didn't hurry the last of the light.